All right, should we start?
Let's go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome everybody on behalf of the Kenilworth Union Church Racial Justice Committee. Let me, 1 second, there was something else I wanted to do here. Oh, okay. Laura and I have been asked to say a few words about the committee and then about the presentation that we're looking forward to tonight.
Oh, I know, I'm moving this up so I can see better.
I need to mute.
Maybe
I think everybody should mute.
Yeah.
We all mute? Let's see.
I don't know how to mute.
So let me just say a few words about the Racial Justice Committee. It's a new committee at the church. Laura and I were asked to co-chair it, and we have 8 members of the committee with us, and they include Bill Evertsberg, Susan Bonderot, Sally Campbell, Michael Holling, Tommy McTammany, Scott Myers, Diane Rand, and Henry White. And we have met several times as a committee. We have identified ways that we think we can be helpful to the church. And the 3 general areas are education and awareness, bridge building, and what we call action/justice. The first of those is obviously easier to do. It's probably the logical starting point in any event and easier to do in COVID. And so, so we begin that adventure together. And before, Laura, before you talk about tonight's presentation, let me just say that, and it did come up earlier when we were chatting, there's some terrific material on the website under, it's under Grow on the Kenilworth Union website. And Scott and Susan have done a great job of identifying thoughtful material. They're going to continue to update facts on there and really encourage you to just get used to going there and seeing what's new.
So we're just grateful that everybody's taken some time. I hope you don't have, some of you I'm sure have Zoom fatigue, and we just appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time tonight. I wanted to just mention that we are hopefully going to want to post this. So if you have any comments that you would rather not share that would be reposted on the webpage, then just contact us after the meeting, or Bill, or whoever you're comfortable asking a question to, because this is going to be recorded and hopefully put up. And with that being said, I just want to thank Sally Campbell for being awesome. And we had no idea that she had so many talents, one of which is a fabulous poem that she shared with our committee. And we all said, we're making this a program. So she will kindly read it for us, and that will be a springboard. And then Bill will continue helping us all digest it and other topics.
Bill, do you want to put up the PowerPoint now before Sally reads it?
I do, but I'm getting that disabled message, Dana.
Okay.
Let me in.
All right, I'll let you in. No worries.
Okay.
How's that?
Let's see, is that,
Let's see. All participants.
Yeah.
How's that?
There we go. Does that work?
Great.
can you see my screen, guys?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, we can definitely see it.
Okay, and there's Sally's poem. Sally.
Oh,
You're
okay.
on.
I met a man, confident, comfortable, successful, rich. Traveled well beyond his niche. By my own bootstraps, he declared. Remarkable to come so far on one's own bootstraps. Yet, I had to wonder, where were the boots when he took up the straps? Had he come from a long line of slaves? Were his grandparents illiterate? Was his father chronically unemployed? Did he live in a crime-ridden neighborhood? And when he was a child, does his father beat him and his mother? Or did he even know his father? Was he told they didn't want him? Did he trudge to school through violent city streets, dodging guns and gang lords, derelicts and drug pushers, passing burned out buildings and trash-filled vacant lots? And when he reached the school, was he even scared inside? Were his textbooks used and tattered? Were the painted walls all peeling? Were they covered with graffiti? Was the building old and tired, ready to be retired? Did the hallway seem to say, you don't really matter? Did the system scream, no hope? Were the few who cared far distance and from another scope? Did all the doors seem closed when he wanted to go through them? Did the open cracks grow smaller as he tried to escape the squalor? If the man says yes to this and more, then he's arrived and earned his credit. But if not, what did the bootstraps matter? He arrived before he started.
Nicely done, Sally.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very moving and penetrating poem. Who has some comments or questions about the poem?
How long did you work on that, Sally?
Actually, I wrote this some time back. My son taught school in Chicago, and my school only had all Black students, and I got a lot of stories that way.
Wow.
So his stories were the inspiration for the composition of this poem?
They were his stories, his experiences, which were wonderful to hear about, and he was there, I guess, two years, maybe a little more. And he left because you don't make a lot of money as a teacher, and he wanted to start a family, so he left. But he loved those kids and had wonderful stories.
Some of us gathered in July to think about the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. We also looked at how to be an anti-racist, and also the cross and the lynching tree. And Sally's poem is sort of took poetic. Sally's poem put Robin DiAngelo's book into poetic form in my mind. So let me just take you through some of the things we looked at before. White Fragility's subtitle is Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Remember, Dr. DiAngelo is Italian-American. She grew up in poverty herself. Her mother died young, and she is very honest that this shaped her life and work, because when she was young in her part of the world, cancer was shameful and it was not right to talk about it. And so when she encountered a new virus, a new disease in her adulthood called white racism, she decided to talk about it. She got her PhD in 2004 at the University of Washington, and she was a full professor at Westfield State University in Massachusetts. And now she's an associate professor at the alma mater where she obtained her doctorate. She's also a diversity trainer. Many of her stories come from trying to help corporations and nonprofits and other institutions be more sensitive to the diverse array of humanity in most rooms these days. Oh shoot, I hope I'm gonna be able to read this.
You can minimize that.
I can?
Hold on. Maybe you can't.
Bill, we can read it.
Okay, I'll try to read this. While there's no biological race as we understand it, race as a social construct has profound significance in every aspect of our lives. Race will influence whether we will survive our birth, where we are most likely to live, and which schools we will attend, who our friends and partners will be, what careers we will have, and how much money we will earn, how healthy we will be, and even how long we can expect to live. So another way of putting what Sally, I think, was trying to say in her poem is there are a lot of people who were born on third base who think they hit a triple, right? So Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, puts it, his parents were among the early African-American executives who made it very good. So he was raised in relative wealth. And that's what his father would tell Corey. He would say, "Don't you walk around here like you hit a triple, boy. You were born on third base." So here is just a little snapshot from Dr. D'Angelo's book. The 10 richest Americans are 100% white. U.S. Congress is 90% white. U.S. governors, 96% white. Top military advisors, 100% white. The president and vice president, 100% white. That will change on January 20. The current U.S. presidential cabinet is 91% white. The people who decide which TV shows we see are 93% white. The people who decide which books we read, 90% white. Which news is covered, 85% white. Which music is produced, 95% white. The directors of the 100 top grossing films of all time, 95 are white and 99 are men. Teachers are 82% white. Full-time college professors, 84% white. And the owners of professional football teams, 95% white. So Dr. D'Angelo talks about always knowing she belongs in the world as a white person. All of these media and communication vehicles reinforce the fact that the normative color of people in the world, especially in the United States, are white. Television, books, film, magazines, billboards, teachers, doctors, counselors, and our heroes. She says, "I'm free to move in virtually any space seen as normal or valuable. I was born into a culture in which I belonged racially. Indeed, the forces of racism were shaping me even before I took my first breath. If I were born in the hospital, regardless of the decade in which I was born, any hospital would be open to me because my parents were white. If my parents attended the childbirth preparation class, the instructor was most likely white. The videos they watched in class likely depicted white people, and their fellow classmates with whom those connections and community were almost all likely white. The doctors and nurses attending my birth were in all likelihood white. Although my parents may have been anxious about the birth process, all parents are, they did not have to worry about how they would be treated by the hospital staff because of their race. The research demonstrating racial discrimination in healthcare assure me that my parents were more likely to have been treated well by hospital personnel and to receive a higher caliber of care than with people of color. Conversely, she says, the people who cleaned my mother's hospital room, did the laundry, cooked and cleaned in the cafeteria, and maintained the facilities were most likely people of color. The very context in which I entered the world was organized hierarchically by race. Based on this hierarchy, we could predict whether I would survive. Can't read that last sentence, but. So in her memoir, Michelle Obama talks about the mild surprise she experienced when in 2008, she went to the White House and all the butlers were black. It sort of reinforces our stereotypes of who's on top and who's on the bottom, who's upstairs at Downton Abbey and who's downstairs at Downton Abbey. So I just did a screen grab. I just Googled Adam and Eve. And these are the images that pop up when you Google Adam and Eve. They're all European people. It's not surprising because these are famously paintings by European painters. But still, these are the images that reinforce what is normative for a human being. But, this causes us to forget that they weren't white, right? They were Semitic. They were Middle Eastern people. They were Arabic. This is a screen grab if you Google Mary and Jesus. Very kind of Anglo-Saxon features and skin tones. The image on the left is a reconstruction by anthropologists of what a first century Palestinian probably looked like. And the image on the left is of a real 21st century Palestinian girl. This is a screen grab if you Google the scientifically perfect face.
Dang.
So a couple weeks ago in the New York Times book review, there was a review of this book, Who Gets In and Why? A Year Inside College Admissions by Jeffrey Salingo. It was a co-review of this book called Unacceptable, Privilege, Deceit, and the Making of the College Admissions Scandal. This book, Unacceptable, is really a study of the, what is it called, Operation Varsity Blues, of the scores of people who tried to cheat college admissions, most famously at USC, by paying bribes to a college admissions counselor. This is the reviewer, Anthony Abraham Jack. He wrote this review called A Separate and Unequal System of College Admissions. You can see that he's jet black. Shoot, I hope I can read this. Well, everybody has that bar on that, right? Okay, here we go. Announcing charges against celebrities and corporate executives as part of the cheating investigation known as Operation Varsity Blues, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts said, there can be no separate college admissions system for the wealthy. This black man, Dr. Jack, laughed mirthlessly, almost missing his equally dubious claim that there will not be a separate criminal justice system either. His words jolted me back to when privileged classmates informed me that I was admitted to Amherst College because I was black or poor. They couldn't decide which. They saw my biography as my hook, yet they refused to see their pedigree as their hook. Instead, my peers offered evidence of hard work, their words buoyed by blind faith in meritocracy. So meritocracy is one of the myths that Dr. D'Angelo comes down hard on as a plank in our platform of white racism in the United States. It really is not truly a meritocracy in our democracy. When Lori Loughlin got her fine of 60 days and Felicity Huffman got her fine of 2 weeks, I think, this woman named Kelly Williams Bowler came back into people's consciousness. In 2011, she was in prison for 10 days for falsifying an address to get her kids into a better school district in Akron, Ohio. By comparison, Ms. Loughlin's prison fine was 60 days. She also got a $150,000 fine and 100 hours of community service for a $500,000 fraud. So equal justice systems, right? So Mr. Jack, the book reviewer, says that some top-ranked colleges admit 1/3 to 1/2 of all applicants by early decision. Now, this doesn't seem pernicious. Everybody can decide early if they want to. Everybody can apply by early decision. But the problem is early deciders are admitted at 2 to 3 times the rate of all others, and only 5% of students apply via early decision. Why? Because poor and middle-class students cannot afford to apply by early decision. They have to wait to see what a school will offer them in terms of a financial aid package. So once again, it's bootstraps is a relative thing for people of different color and different means. It's just an image that came up on a Google search when I Googled American diversity. This is the US House of Reps in 2018. Getting a little diverser, seeing spots of color in our House of Representatives. This was an image that was striking to me. These are all the vice presidents in the history of the United States. whoever put this out didn't put a single word on this image because the image speaks for itself. So Dana and Laura informed me of a very interesting program that's coming up on November 19, 6:30 Central Time. It is presented remotely by the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie. And it's Richard Rothstein, the author of the book, The Color of Law, The Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And so I guess Dana and Laura, maybe will we provide a link for people to hook up with that when November 19 gets closer?
Sure, let's definitely do that.
So my son-in-law asked me the other day, don't you think identity politics have gone too far? So I'll just throw that out for the group's consideration.
Bill, it's George Wishart. In what context was he using that?
The comment about identity politics?
Yeah.
I think my son-in-law was reacting to how much people are making of Kamala Harris's identities. You know, she checks every box, right? Mm-hmm. She's South Asian, she's biracial, she's Jamaican, she's a woman, she is a stepmother, all of those things. In other words, people could say to Kamala, you became vice president because of what you look like and who you are. So I think that may have been what he was reacting to. I think he would say that what's more important to a person in position of authority and prominence would be ability and experience and education rather than your identity racially or ethnically. I thought it was a provocative question.
Well, she certainly has experience. I mean, it's not like it's just those boxes you mentioned. She's served in many challenging positions in the state of California.
Yeah, and I think my impression is that a part of the reason why they are dwelling on that to an extent is because people are celebrating the breakthrough of all of what you just showed, where you've got, 45 vice presidents that are all white and male, and now you've got one that is breaking a whole bunch of norms, which I celebrate. During this time, I actually went back and watched John McCain's concession speech, and he dwelt on the fact that this was a momentous occasion when Barack Obama was becoming president. He didn't go on and on about his qualifications. He was referring to the fact that he was an African American, and he was actually celebrating that along with the rest of America when he did that. So I think that we'll hear about it for a time, but hopefully we won't always just have to check the boxes as if once you do that, you therefore qualify.
Well, you know, one of the things that I found so wonderful about her speech was that she was talking about she was just the first person to break the glass ceiling and that she would have other young women follow her. What a role model. And I think it's absolutely wonderful.
You know,
one of the most.
Can I just make a?
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say, to make a point on this identity politics point. You know, I think at a macro level, right? If you ask, I'm not going to say certainly everyone, but I bet you ask a lot of people in the country, they'll say, yes, there needs to be equality of opportunity, and there hasn't been, and that's not right, right? So, you know, many people think maybe that they had the hardest time, but, you know, I think that most people would recognize, or many people would certainly recognize, that African Americans have, you know, been mistreated for a long time. And they, in general, many people, certainly not all, think that needs to be corrected. The challenge is when you get down to the individual, right? my child can't get into college because the college is taking more African Americans. The challenge is when it all of a sudden hits home. I didn't get the promotion because the fire department now has to hire more African Americans. So at a macro level, people say, yes, I want society to correct the injustices from the past. I just don't want to be the one being treated now unfairly. And so it's like, how do you try and correct the problems that the last 400 years caused without losing the engagement and the support of people who now will feel that they're unjustly treated. I think that becomes such a hard thing to deal with, and which is why I think you see so many perhaps less educated whites who, may see their jobs going away, may see their jobs being taken over by immigrants, all of a sudden feeling, I'm being unjustly treated. I don't have an answer, but I think it's the macro level seems so righteous, but it's the micro level that's so hard.
I would tend to agree with you, because I can remember back in the 60s when my husband was going to law school at the University of Iowa. There were people who they let into the school who did not have good grades, but they were trying to be very helpful to those people who came from lesser situations. And those people sometimes had to pass the law review 2 and 3 times because they flunked them. And one of them was a very lovely individual. He was just greatly loved and a good person, but he didn't pass the law school. And this was when they were trying to do the exact same thing in the 60s when you are talking about what they're trying to do now. And this was a very frustrating thing. And that's hard to deal with because you want to help those people who need to be helped, but yet when, how much can you give extra help to those people and then keep other people out?
I wonder if something happened with the screen share, Bill?
When you made it possible for Bill to share the screen, you made it possible for everyone to share the screen, and somebody accidentally clicked on share screen. So
I think it was Elaine. Hey, Elaine, can you hit stop share? Good.
Great.
Sorry about that. I'm having a little issue here.
Scott, I was going to say that I totally get your question and the way you framed it. And I think then the question that I have to ask myself, or that I'm trying to learn to ask myself, is it may be that white person kids have their challenge is a little greater than it was, but is that just the fact that we're trying to even out the system and that we're trying to take away the advantage that they previously enjoyed? Right.
And I think that that's probably the only way you can do it, right? At the end of the day, some individuals need to be boosted along and other individuals won't be. But I think what we're going through is kind of, for the first time, white people are having to face that, right? Where blacks have perhaps faced it for 400 years, and it's tough, right? It's tough to deal with, and it's tough to accept that may be the case.
I just listened to a wonderful program with Abram X. Kendi, of the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist. And it was, I don't know if you can pick up on it afterwards, but it was promoted by 10 different libraries in the area. And what he was talking about in terms of racism, similar to what you were saying, Scott, that, you know, we do need as white people to work on racial justice. But one of the points he made that I thought was really, really right, he said, enter it with humility. Don't think you're the savior. Be humble. And I thought, well, that's really good advice. And I found his book, for me, even more meaningful than White Fragility. And his examination of he interspersed in his book, not only the cultural, the biological, etc. He interspersed it with his own personal experiences growing up, which I found very meaningful. Of course, we're looking at White Fragility, written by a white author, and then How to Be an Anti-Racist by a Black author.
I love your point about being humble. Just the more I learn, the more I realize how much I have to learn.
Sure. That's
reacting to Scott's remarks about how we need to catch people up a little bit. Need to give people a bump or a boost. I did not go to Michigan myself, but I sent them $250,000 to send my son there. And
it's a joint effort, Bill.
Yeah, and he's a third generation Wolverine. His mother went there, and his maternal grandfather went there. So this goes back 20 years or so ago. Michigan clung to its affirmative action impulses a lot longer and a lot harder than most universities did, because the courts have not been friendly to the bump Scott was talking about a minute ago. You know, in these college admissions programs, you get 20 points for getting a high SAT score, and you get 20 points for having a high GPA, and you get 20 points for extracurriculars, and you get 20 points for APs, and you get 20 points for being articulate and eloquent in your writing. At Michigan, I mean, I'm making the point levels up, but at Michigan, you got 20 points just for being Black. And they argued that campus life was improved by that diversity. So that is an artificial bump for people of color, but Michigan's argument was that makes life better for the white people in Ann Arbor. I don't know how they're faring now, but the courts have not been friendly to affirmative action programs in college admissions. And, the recent election, it was not a mandate to blue America, was it? It was not a mandate to the Democratic Party.
That's right.
The party lost seats in the House. In California, all the liberal propositions went down. I don't know if all of them did, but it was clearly not a mandate for liberal tendencies. So, it looks like the election was a referendum on the president's personality rather than the drift leftward of America on some of these issues. That's just my opinion, my take on the whole thing.
And
no, I think your political analysis is right, but let me just comment on the concern I've got is that a lot of affirmative action is by the time the population is in adulthood or getting towards adulthood. And you've got to go, what Jeffrey Canada discovered, who started the Harlem Project, is you've got to go back to pre-birth. You've got to talk to the parents before they give birth to the child on what to expect and how to manage it. And then take them through the education system. Because education and nurturing that is important to that group, because otherwise they're always going to be behind. Because as Scott said, there's 400 years going against them.
I was an exchange student from Luther College to an all-Black college in Little Rock, Flanders Smith in 1964. And what I noticed there was that it was so much easier because the students hadn't had the background of the education I had had. So the classes were so much easier than they were at my home school.
Mhm.
I just I wanted to make a comment on the identity politics point, and somewhat in light of the recent election, that we all have to be careful how the pundits try to cause these continued divisions, so that as we talk about the Hispanic vote went here, and because they wanted these jobs or whatever, it's kind of a slight to other groups. And it's similar analysis that happened, let's say, in some of those California decisions, the affirmative action decision. There's this trying to drive wedges. And we've seen it with white working class, and then we've seen it we're starting to hear it from this election as, oh, the Hispanics voted for this way or that way. And it's, and I think Hispanics don't want to be a monolith. And then also it is, there's something there that's trying to push up against the Black activism, I believe. So I just think we all have to be really careful about that, not allowing that to be part of the dialogue so much, as people sort of start to say whose fault happened with this election and that type of thing.
Well, it kind of goes back to Dana's point about understanding, right? You know, starting with Sally's poem, just understanding that, yeah, even though you might have had a hard time, you know, there's a lot of people who had much harder times, right? There are many people who, you know, didn't have the benefit of, you know, maybe you grew up poor in a rural community, but you know what, you felt like you had a safe place, right? So there's a lack of understanding there. There's a lack of understanding in the sense of kind of what you were just saying, Susan, of, you know, you look at everybody as a monolith. Oh, okay, all Blacks think this. Well, no, there are Black immigrants who've come from Ethiopia who have one set of beliefs, and you have people who've been here for 400 years who have another set of beliefs, and you have people who are rich and poor. And I think it's only when we develop an understanding, you know, kind of a deeper understanding that individuals have their own experiences, that you can at least maybe begin to see the unfairness in society. It's so easy to just kind of pass things off as kind of a, you know, I had it tough, or I got through it and everyone else can get through it. And until you really kind of get down to the individual level, right, you don't really have that level of understanding.
You know, one of the things that came out with the program I was just listening to was that, you know, when whites, an individual person, one white person makes a mistake, that's one white person who made a mistake. One Black person makes a mistake, kills somebody, and it's the whole Black race. And so there's that dichotomy, you know, between
The other way.
the white versus the Black and the reality of it.
Who's my flower?
It's probably Sherry Fowler. Probably her family calls her Ma.
So Dana, you have the power. You can mute, actually. You can, as the host, you can mute people who aren't on mute.
All right. Well, I'm enjoying the discussion.
Do you have another discussion question, Bill, you want to toss out? That was a good one. Or anybody else?
I'm not sure.
I just have one thing I'd like to add. If we recall, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if you watch her movie of when she went to Harvard, and the professor pointedly told her, "Why are you here? You're taking up a man's seat." You know, it's that same sort of you know, what I forget who mentioned it, but the idea that seats were given to black kids that were not as qualified as some of the white applicants back when affirmative action was. We thought that would be a good thing, a way to help get a step up and get a generation of young black men more educated to get better jobs. So, but it's been, you know, I think I'm reading a book right now called Caste, and the writer's making the comparison between India and America, that we're both built on a caste system, and in our case, the bottom caste are black African Americans, and it's been true since our beginning. And I mean, you know, when you put the paradigm in that way, I mean, it's just really sort of astounding. But further, when I start thinking of other cultures I've studied, there is always some group that's at that bottom that people speak badly of. You know, in Finland, it's the northern, up in northern Finland, they have the reindeer people. Well, they're looked down upon by others as you know, they're picturesque, but I think every culture ends up putting some group at the bottom.
But in this case, I can speak to John because I'm married to him. In this case, yeah, I can differ.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway, in this case, those people who were on the bottom weren't slaves. And I think that's where, you know, the bottom line is that Black people came to this country as slaves. I'm not talking about later immigrants, but the early on population. And that's, you know, how do you rise up from being a slave and the mentality of the white supremacists?
So Laura and Dana and Scott and Susan and Sally, members of the RJC, I have a friend of mine who's a very engaging teacher. He would love to come and talk to us about the Wilkerson book, Caste, if you would like to do this again with another book. So
that'd be neat.
If John gives the book his endorsement, maybe we ought to think about that.
Yeah. That would be good.
May I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. A thought that strikes me as we talk about slavery is that I think the challenge that we have when we think of identity politics or racial differences is that especially with Black people, of course, it spills over into other races too, American Indian, Hispanics as well. But for Black people, they're really the only group I know of in the United States that didn't choose to come here. They were forced as a group, and then once upon arrival, their culture, their family unit, almost to a degree, their humanity was attempted to be obliterated for almost 400 years. And then I think the challenge that occurs is that that as I've watched some of these videos and listened to some of these things about slavery, the challenge is that all at once, literally, I don't know if it was millions, but an entire culture, a Black culture of slavery, was suddenly dispersed. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think we live with that today. That's essentially the challenge. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that I think that's the challenge that we live with today as we talk about fairness and striving for equality, is that we have 400 years of not personally instituting it, but as a nation, we have 400 years of a problem that, to a certain degree, our society created, not us individually. And I think that's the real challenge we've got with both racism and, as you put it, identity politics, because it really speaks to the idea of having to, as a nation and as a culture, change our mindset. And as white people, we have to, in effect, learn learn this, I guess you could say. John, I don't know if you did, if it was that was it you who sent that video from the minister friend of yours about loving one another as family?
Yes, us and them.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was quite profound. That if you, I've actually, as I've met strangers, and a fellow was panhandling as I stopped at the stoplight today, and that thought popped into my mind, is that he was black, and I rather than immediately roll up the window, I let the window stay down and let him talk to me, thinking, that thought that, he could be my family, or how would I treat my family? What would I do? At the very least, I'm going to listen to him. And I think that's the challenge as we talk about these matters, is that this issue is so huge that it sometimes, as individuals, can be a little overwhelming for us to deal with. But your video, I think, essentially gives us the answer. It's kind of one person at a time.
Yep.
Yeah. That's my point.
Kendi was talking about teaching your children, even non-verbally, when they're 2, 3, 4 years old, of how not to be a racist. That children pick up on very subtle kinds of, reactions. For example, a mother who's wheeling her child in the buggy, and she sees a black man, and she gives the impression to her child that there's danger. And so I thought that was very interesting, like, how do you teach your children not to be racist? I don't think it's an easy thing given our society structure.
I kind of think that it's going to be very hard to do this if we don't know some Black people personally, have some kind of exchange so that we hear what they say. Not that they're going to educate us, because I know that's our job and they get mad if you even think about it, but I think we need some Black friends, and you learn a lot from Black friends. And we don't have Black friends because it's very difficult to do that, because they're not nearby. And you have to find them where they are. But it's very enriching if you can do that. I think maybe, we've had dinners for 8, maybe at some point in the future when we can get together again, we have dinners for 8 and we have 4 white and 4 black. I mean, I just think until we kind of are one, we can't be one. Does that make sense?
Let me bring up, just, I'm curious to get the read. So, Scott, I think you framed everything really well at the beginning. Kind of said, I think it's all very clear that advantages that whites have had and blacks have not. And that we, those that have taken the time to kind of understand that to some degree, and we don't understand it because we haven't lived it, but there's a sense that, okay, we need to kind of make this better. To me, the kind of affirmative action stuff is, is a way to do that. But I think we're not, those aren't really changing, they're not really changing stuff all that much. And I think there's an issue of how far, how you go about doing that. But the issue is, how do you really get it to change? And maybe the answer is again, one step at a time. But one thing that's been challenging is there was kind of the sense of, the country acknowledging it. And, when we started this process, right, let's read these books and let's really understand it and acknowledge it, and, and try and that'll get us going in terms of getting the right direction, and that then we have, unfortunately, kind of the reaction. So I think what is challenging is just this understanding, and then, you know, Black Lives Do Matter, but then the Black Lives Matter movement seems very hostile and militaristic to an awful lot of people. And you know, I kind of understand their point. It's like, unless they are, then nothing could change. But you know, I don't know what people think about it, but it makes it more difficult to, you know, kind of, let's have this discussion and move forward in a really constructive, consistent way. And now now it's, you know, people have really backed off, be it, you know, the violence and the riots and all of that. So I don't quite how to deal with that, but I think it's relevant, right? As a community and a church, you know, think about it.
I was part of a discussion with my college, which we had both Black and white people talking about white fragility. And one of the women who was Black, we were talking about the riots. And she was saying, of course, that they're not the militants, the ones that really rioted. They took opportunity. She said, they have nothing. They have nothing. And then there are these stores open, and so I'm just going to go and take. And it's something that we as white people think, oh my God, how can they do that? That's illegal, that's stealing. And yet what she was saying is there's so much anger. And I think that's hard for us to take sometimes, because I don't agree with rioting. I mean, I don't like violence at all. But it was interesting to hear her perspective of why there was some violence. And I do think that there were outside agitators that came in, but then things got carried away.
Somebody mentioned, and maybe it was you, George, uncomfortable conversations with a Black man. And I heard a simple explanation about the rioting from one of the episodes, and it rang true to me. And he gives the example of being on a bike path and you see somebody way in front of you and you yell on your left and they don't respond, and you get a little closer, and so you yell it a little bit louder, and you get a little closer and you yell it a little bit louder, and then you're about to crash into them, so you really yell it loudly. And it might be that progress in social justice and racism has tried to be peaceful, and it seems like the systems haven't changed very much. And maybe people were yelling louder in the 60s and some progress was made, but not a lot or not enough. So it's, the rioting is, I think, and the protesting, peaceful protest, I think is great. The rioting people find confounding, but you know, I think when you just feel you haven't been heard and things haven't changed, the anger boils up in ways that as a white person, you know, I don't live that, but I'm trying to understand it.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, you go back and kind of going back to Scott, your point, you know, go back even to the 60s and the civil rights movement. You know, you had Malcolm X and, you know, the Black Muslim movement. You had obviously the Black Panthers. So you had segments within the Black community wanting to go at a faster pace and proposing strategies to go at a faster pace. And I think that's what we have the same thing today, right? We have, you know, people who, you know, are advocating and just simply making the statement, Black Lives Matter. And some people are even pushing back against that because they don't really understand that, you know, really, it's like Black Lives Matter too, right? They matter in addition to white lives. But then you have people within the Black Lives Matter movement who want to go faster, right? You have, you know, people who feel that the political movement needs to push faster. And I think we're going to see that, you know, for many years to come, where even within, you know, whatever political movements are formulated, Some people are going to say we got to go faster. Some people will say we got to go slower. Some people say we got to, the focus should be on education or healthcare, and some people say it should be reparations. But I think what I try and do is not to get. I think some people hear that and they just reject the whole idea of the statement, the fundamental statement that Black Lives Matter, right? If they hear, oh wait, it's a political movement that has socialistic proposals, well, I'm going to reject that. Well, no, it's the fundamental premise is the one that should be universal and should be focused on, and the political means of achieving that are something that we can debate, but we shouldn't be debating kind of the underlying, and I don't think anybody is proposing that, but we should, we all have to agree to the underlying statement of understanding individuals, treating them as individuals, not treating them as somebody who belongs in a political movement or somebody who is of a certain race. I think that's where we have to begin to move away from.
And it's similar to what somebody raised in the beginning about the amplification of when a Black person does something wrong, it gets more highlighted. Similarly, in some ways, some of these riots or looting got so much amplification and throws people off track in some ways of the hundreds of thousands of Black people each day going to their jobs, walking into a store and someone is suspecting them for just going about their daily life, their daily ritual. And we get thrown off by, hey, really challenging situations like the riots, like the looting, that do make white people very, very uncomfortable. But the bigger ocean liner of greater equality and understanding of Black Americans is really, we can't get thrown off of that by some very challenging issues and roadblocks that are going to come along the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't have to teach our children, say, if the police stop you, keep your hands on the steering wheel. And we don't have to, teach them fear of authority. I mean, we had an experience, John and I did, when our son was coming home late on my bike. And all of a sudden, a policeman appeared in our house saying that he was a window peeper, which he was, and he was at a friend's watching a movie, saying he was a window peeper and that he had a stolen bike. It was my bike. And I thought, if my son had been Black, what would have happened to him? It wouldn't have been just a little, hello, we brought your son back. It would have been a lot more serious. And, we as privileged white people, we don't have to deal with that at all.
Suzanne, you had mentioned being on calls with both Black and white people. I'd love to hear more about that, because I think that's exactly what Sally's talking about in terms of us, spending more time with people that are different than us and kind of hearing their side of the story. Have you found those conversations to be helpful?
Yes. And, I still have wonderful memories, and I have a very good friend left from the time that I was at Philander Smith in 1964. And, she is more hesitant to talk about race with me than I am to talk about race with her, which I find very interesting. She's a good friend. She lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and I did say, too bad the wrong man won for the Senate, but we won't go there. But she, that experience for me, way back in the 60s, this was when my parents thought I was going to be shot, which I wasn't. But in fact, we even did a Henrik Ibsen play, and I was white and my husband was Black. But those experiences, I think, broadened my mind. Just being there and being the only white person there is a sense of minority too, which gave me a whole different perspective about the race and being in communication with people who are not the same as I am.
And I would say a lot of you guys know our son-in-law is Black, and the whole Black Lives Matter movement and living as a Black person can be exhausting. So when you say your friend who's Black doesn't want to have the conversation as comfortably or as easily as you do, it could be, you know, our son-in-law is exhausted by it. So for us, we need to do the work. We can't just say, hey, so what can we do for you? What should white people be doing? Like, we need to, the problem is because of us, and we need to learn why and how to make it better, in my opinion.
I agree.
Did anybody see Van Jones on CNN this weekend?
No.
His reaction to
the
results of the election.
Yes,
he was saying exactly what you just said, Laura. So much of your energy goes into just maintaining your dignity and to fighting people's impulse to tell you that you are inferior to me.
Just like when you're in a store, may I help you is, why are you in here? Like, you're not, well, do we ever feel that way? Or how many times do any of us say, I don't need the receipt, you know? Like, you are always perfectly comfortable in any store that you go in. And that's just one tiny example of how it is different if your skin is Black.
Right.
I think this might have been a StoryCorps story or a Moth story recently about two African-American women who were vacationing or studying in South Africa, and they went into a jewelry store, a knick-knack store, a tchotchke, you know, jewelry store, and we're typically making sure the proprietor saw that they were handling the merchandise but not pocketing it, and being very conspicuous about putting things back when they took out a set of earrings or something, and then realizing that the proprietors weren't in the store, they were sitting out in the front, and about how revolutionary that was to be ignored as a shopper in South Africa when in the United States they would watch your every move, to your point, Laura.
There's also, I'll just mention an article, it's a 10-part series in the Washington Post called Sincerely Michelle. And if you don't get the Washington Post, I think you can just Google it. And the first installment of this woman who writes for the Washington Post on personal finance is, did you hire me because I'm Black? And she gets so many questions when she is first hired of, where did you go to college? And it wasn't an Ivy League college. And, you know, questions about her pedigree that didn't match what we would all think you might need to get a job at the Washington Post. The metrics that, you know, the white establishment might think make you worthy of that position. So she went into her boss to say, did you hire me because I'm Black? And he said, yes, because we needed diversity. And I hired you because you're poor, and I hired you because you grew up poor, and I hired you because you're a woman. And I think sometimes we think affirmative action is giving somebody a leg up, but sometimes, many times, that diversity in a boardroom or in a job adds a perspective that is so enriching and helpful. And I think there's studies too that a diversity in board of directors of companies make the companies more successful. So, you know, it's not always that we're pulling these people up, but that maybe they are making whatever position they're entering, they're elevating it in ways that we didn't think were the proper metrics.
Well, that's sort of what you were saying, Bill, about the University of Michigan and how it made it better. Right? Did I understand you correctly?
Affirmative action. I think you did.
Yeah.
When Michael, our son, applied there, they had supplemental essays to the Common App that he had to fill out. And the first one was, it said that the University of Michigan prides itself on its diversity and inclusiveness, and what will you do to contribute on your part to the university? And I mean, and I don't know if everybody got that same question, but I mean, he literally had a very, very difficult time trying to, he's 17 years old and trying to compose his thoughts, and white, blue eyes, blonde hair. Yeah,
6'4" Dutch boy with bleach blonde hair.
Yeah. So, but he got in, so he must have, I never read it. He never shared it with me or whatever, but I'm hoping he composed something that they, found compelling or whatever.
Bill, one of the things we could think about doing that we did a number of years ago at the church is, I'm not sure how it all happened, but our family and Roger Winship and his family ended up on the far south side of the church for, I guess it was an exchange or something. We showed up just somehow. We were invited there, and it was probably one of the more enriching moments for our family, because this was not a threatening environment. It was not, I'm going down the street and there's a black person coming at me. We were the minority. There was nobody else in the church except for the black congregation, and we were so welcomed. And it was an enriching moment. They threw a lunch for us. They had a lovely time, and it was your typical black congregation. It was your typical after church lunch where everybody, there were 5 or 6 people back in the kitchen making everything so it was all ready right after the service, and we ate in the basement, and it was great. But it may be another way that we as a congregation, once COVID is over, could potentially have more interaction with other communities.
This is Mike, and I've found that to be universally true, that if you ever visit a predominantly African-American church, they have hospitality and like an exuberant welcome. They have that mastered. That is so what you experienced was not an anomaly. There's a consistent, there's a consistent sort of tenet of welcoming anybody regardless of, what you look like. So it's, I've had the same experience, so I echoed what you just said.
It's like the Bible study at the South Carolina church.
It's just open arms for sure.
I've heard a minister say of his experience with that, visiting a black church. He said, "We brought cookies. They brought Jesus."
Yeah.
They showed us a thing or two.
In my Greenwich church, George, there was a First Baptist Church African-American congregation 2 blocks away from mine, and so we would trade preachers and choirs. The First Baptist choir and preacher would come to First Presbyterian, and I and my choir would go there. They were very meaningful, rich experiences.
Maybe we could do something like that with the black church in Glencoe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I listened to one of their sermons one Sunday. You can get it all online, and it really is. It's very. I would be happy to go there anytime.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody participated in this. What was the film we saw with them at the Wilmette Theater?
We did a joint.
We have done
together.
a joint thing.
Yes. What was the film? Isn't that terrible?
I know. On memory issues. Was it on memory issues?
I thought it was my senior brain.
It was a film about racial issues, and so we got together with Dwayne Gary, is the pastor there. Some of their
how long ago was that?
A couple of years, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like
maybe
2 years
2
ago.
years
ago. So it wasn't Just Mercy.
No, it was before that. It was.
No, it wasn't Just Mercy.
It wasn't a Hollywood release like Just Mercy.
Okay.
No, it was a documentary, and it was not for wide release.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I think I saw that too, but I can't remember the name of it either.
Yeah. But it was good.
But I've got a better excuse because I'm really older.
Well, I'd just like to say one thing, that I think Sally, that you're an incredibly talented writer. And I appreciate your talent and sharing it with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Well said.
Hear, hear.
So shall we make that our finale, Laura and Dana?
Sure.
We don't have any. We don't have anything else
Taking
scheduled.
the time to join us. We appreciate it.
great group that came out.
Thanks for hosting us, Laura and Dana.
Good job,
Thank
Laura.
you.
Thank you, Sally.
Thanks,
Nice
Sally.
job.
Thank you.
Hi,
Well, thanks,
hi, Carol
everybody.
Berry.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Peace.